Folks, we talk about elections. What do I keep saying? Elections matter. In the last election, black voter turnout dropped. A lot of people stayed at home, not just African Americans, Latinos, young voters as well. And so what really happened? How did Vice President Kamala Harris lose to Donald Trump? He's running around talking about this mandate he got, and he got this and got that, won all these counties, all these things. And you got a bunch of people hollering, talking about, yeah, it was a mandate, but the reality, was it really a mandate? Well, Terence Woodberry, Hit Strategies, has really been going through the numbers, but also been doing focus groups, getting a sense of what happened. And so he joins us right now. Terence, glad to have you here. Let's walk through the data. So give us the top line of what you have discovered, what happened in November, especially with African Americans.
Absolutely, Roland. Thank you for having me, man. Look, Hit Strategies has been poring over exit poll data, voter file data, and sitting with black voters in focus groups since the election to really understand what happened. Where was there underperformance? Where was there underperformance, and why? Why did it happen? There's a couple of trends that we're starting to see here, man. Number one is that Democrats, frankly, underperformed with all of their base voters. Every group that you would consider a Democratic base voter, we got less votes with. That includes Black people, Latinos, young voters, voters of color, men of color, urban voters, working class voters, all the groups that you would consider. The one I want to focus on, because we've talked a lot about the gender and the generation gap between Black voters, that Black men and younger Black voters are showing up a little bit different than some of their counterparts. Well, Black men, compared to any other group of men of color, held the line. Only 2% drop off from Joe Biden's 79% support amongst Black men to Kamala Harris's 77%. Again, that's the smallest drop off of any group of Black voters. What concerns me there, Roland, is the trend over time. It is not that we lost 2% of Black men in this last election. It's that we lose 2 to 5% in every election. And that's how we go from the 92% of Black men's support for Barack Obama and 82% of Black men's support for Hillary Clinton to 77% for Kamala Harris. I want to be clear that Democrats don't just have a Black men problem. Democrats have a men problem, especially young men, especially men of color, and that's exactly what we've been digging into.
So what's the reason behind that problem? What are they saying? And how do you fix it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we're seeing here, and these are trends we've been lifting for quite a while. The first is that on some of these social issues, Roland, we are discovering that Democrats really don't know how to talk to Black folks about issues of gender, sexuality, race, the role of gender in society. In fact, I just want to show you, read you some of the poll numbers here. Amongst Black men, amongst all Black voters, 66% of Black voters agree that men should be head of household. My mama agrees with that. My daddy agrees with that. 59% of Black women agree with that. 75% of Black men agree with that. But why does that matter? Because when in our research as a Kamala Harris pollster, as one of the posters for this campaign, when we discover that there are some groups of voters that have concerns about voting for a woman, well, we shouldn't wag our finger at them and shame them and tell them there's something wrong with them, because that's not what we're seeing in this data. In fact, when they say that men should be head of household, we know that a lot of Black folks get that from church. They got that from the pulpit. They got that from their pastor. They got that from their Bible. And so we're asking them, we're telling them that their Bible has been wrong. And so instead, what we need to do is offer an alternative vision of society where gender roles are evolving and where there is absolutely a role for men in it. And that not all masculinity is toxic. But what is that non-toxic masculinity that we're embracing on the left? What does that look like? How do we demonstrate examples of it? And how do we make Black men feel like they're a part of it?
So Gavin Newsom has this podcast where he recently broke from Democrats when it came to the issue of transgender. Donald Trump, MAGA, was highly successful last year in running, more than $200 million in ads, specifically dealing with transgender surgeries for inmates, but also, as they frame it, men playing women's sports. And I can tell you individually, I heard from black men who were very supportive of Vice President Kamala Harris, very supportive of Democrats, who were like, yo, they're right. And what a lot of people don't understand, and let's be clear, the Harris campaign blew this off like it was no big deal. In January, February, and March, MAGA, the MAGA PACs were running these ads on black radio stations in Detroit, in Atlanta, and other places. They were essentially testing the ground. They came back awesome. What then happens? That clip of Charlemagne and DJ Envy saying, I don't want transgender prisoners getting surgeries, was the second most effective ad out of all the ads that Trump and MAGA ran. So, what does your data say on that issue? Because a lot of Democrats, let's just be clear, coming out of Black Lives Matter, I heard people say, yo, how has this become such a dominant issue? Is that also one of the cultural issues you're seeing show up in your research?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Roland. I'm glad you brought this up because there were some misperceptions about that trans ad. I'm glad you described it the way you did because a lot of people remember that very famous tagline, she's for them and they, and I'm for you. But what they often forget there is that it wasn't just about trans folks. It was about using tax dollars to pay for trans surgeries. And what we're seeing in our data is that the zero-sum politics that really does represent Donald Trump, that for you to get that for other people to get more, you have to get less. Well, we're seeing that in our data. In fact, 59% of black voters believe that the gains of the LGBTQ community come at the expense of the black community. 59%. 64% of black voters believe that the gains of the Latino community come at the expense of the black community. But I want to correct some misperception here. When I see those numbers, 59% of black folks saying that they agree with that LGBTQ gains come at their expense. That's not an anti-LGBTQ number. That's not an anti-trans, anti-gay number. What I see there is a pro-black response that when I look at the black community, I see that we're not getting what we need. And folks that are feeling that pain in their communities need a reason for it. This is just, basic human psychology. I said this on a podcast recently, that when your life sucks, you want to understand why it sucks. And if the person asking for your vote can't tell you why it sucks, then how can they unsuck it? And so Donald Trump came along and told groups of people that the reason that they're feeling this pain in their communities is because another group is getting more, is because immigrants are taking black jobs, is because trans people are taking your tax dollars. Well, what Democrats have to do is, one, we need to learn how to talk about some of these hot button issues in ways that resonate with black folks, but we also need to give people a reason for their pain. Why don't you have what you need? Why does your kid's school not have what it needs? Why does your community not have the resources that it needs? And if it's not going to be because of trans people, and it's not going to be because of immigrants, and it's not going to be because of DEI, then what reason are Democrats going to give? And I think our data gives us some daylight on where we need to go here, because the next question the next data point I want to point out here is that, and this is amongst all voters, not just black voters, 73% of black people, 73% of registered voters believe that greedy corporations and billionaires have rigged the system to keep themselves rich. 73%. And so while the MAGA and Trump are telling communities of color and immigrant communities and LGBTQ communities that all of their problems are because of other people, at the same time that he's giving the keys of the kingdom to Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, at the same time that Donald Trump's cabinet is the wealthiest cabinet in the history of America, worth over $700 billion inside of Donald Trump's cabinet, if you include Elon's $400 billion, which has dropped rapidly due to some of the protests of the communities we're talking about. But if we're not able to offer the alternative, that it is not because of the person that has less than you that you have less. It's because of the people that are hoarding all the resources at the top, that are pillaging our government, and that are cutting services for the least amongst us in order to make themselves rich. I could tell from the data, Roland, that not only Black folks, but Americans will believe that. And we can begin to mobilize the multiracial coalition that is being splintered by these zero-sum politics.
So your biggest three takeaways. You said that in number three, voters trusted Trump on the issues they cared about the most, the economy and immigration. I bet they sure as hell are regretting that. But let me break that down. First of all, 10 of the last 11 recessions, Republicans. Republicans have messaged their way into getting people to believe they're great for the economy. No, they're great for major corporations and tax breaks. They're not great for the economy. And the reality is Biden-Harris is better. They were just horrible at the great things that they actually did. Even on immigration, Biden was even right now, Biden was deporting more people every week than Trump is. But here's the difference. Biden didn't have his Department of Homeland Security secretary out there playing dress up, doing photo ops, photo shoots in gear. She wearing every damn piece of swag they got in Homeland Security. What Donald Trump has done, and this is also tied to messaging, he has turned immigration, deportations into a television show. The Democrats, Biden-Harris, they did it quietly. And so this is one of those things, it shows you that, wait a minute, Biden-Harris, you were deporting more people than Trump actually is. Hell, Trump fired, I forgot which department, because they weren't deporting fast enough. They were still behind. But the difference is they are showing it, they are messaging what they're doing, whereas Biden-Harris did not. Just talk about that, your assessment of that.
That's exactly right, Roland. Democrats really have to get into the game of political theater. I've argued for a long time that our politics are post-policy. Americans agree with us on policy. Black folks agree with us on policy. Young people, people of color, men of color agree with us on policy, from gun control to immigration to I'm sorry, not immigration. That's the only one. Immigration and economy are the only ones that they don't agree with us. But on all of these issues, healthcare, student loans, gun control, climate, they agree with Democrats overwhelmingly on policy. We are losing them on the storytelling. And a part of that is because we're not lifting up the stories of the folks. Even at this moment, at this very moment, Donald Trump's approval rating today is higher than it was in his first term, higher amongst all voters, but even twice as high amongst Black voters. In Donald Trump's first term, he had a 15% approval rating from Black folks at this time in his first term. And now Donald Trump has a 32% approval rating amongst Black folks. And that's because we're not connecting the dots on how the actions that he's taking are hurting Black communities, are hurting Black people. And a lot of that does come with the showmanship. I want to read you a stat here that I believe represents where Black folks would like to see the Democratic Party going. When we ask this question, which of the following statements is closest to your opinion? 22% of Black folks believe that Democrats should keep their heads down and allow Donald Trump to fail and prove that he is incapable of governing. 22% believe that. 78% of Black folks, the overwhelming majority, almost 80%. That's like everybody that's almost everybody that you know. 80% believe that Democrats need to fight back as often and as visibly as possible. The visibly part.
So basically, black people are saying, James Carville, you know what the hell you talking about.
Yeah, that play dead shit is for the birds. Black people want to see less James Carville and more Representative Al Green and the courage that he showed when he stood face to face with Donald Trump and told him that he didn't have a mandate.
You're number two. You said Harris lost, but Dems did not get wiped out. Can you tell Stephen A. that? I mean, all these people are running around. Oh, my God, Dems got destroyed. They got crushed. And I'm like, No, they didn't. They literally almost won the House. And this is the problem when people act like the entire House is burning. It's actually not. It wasn't a mandate. The reality, I mean, we're talking about the shifts that she could have actually won, but when you had all these factors at play, Biden in the debate, him dropping out in July, I mean, you had all, frankly, Biden insiders trashing Harris in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, causing her numbers to go down as well. The reality is she almost pulled it out.
That's right. That's exactly right, Roland. Look, Kamala Harris was able to close a double-digit deficit. Joe Biden was down double digits in battleground states. He was down more than 20 points amongst young people, almost 20 points amongst Black people. Kamala Harris joining the ticket closed that gap in just over 100 days. She was able to close that gap. And in fact, she won 73 million people, 73 million votes. That's the second most votes ever by a presidential candidate, second only to the person that beat her in the same election. That means that Kamala Harris got more votes than Joe Biden when he won. She got more votes in Georgia, in North Carolina, in Michigan than Joe Biden got when he won. And so this idea that there's a mandate, if anything, I would argue that there's a that the country is split and there's a mandate for the other half for the other half of the country that didn't win, that there's a mandate for us to start representing the opposition and not the minority. That folks that have, regardless of what party you're a part of or who you voted for, if you see what's happening and disagree, you are in fact a part of the opposition. That was 73 million people that saw the MAGA shit that he was presenting and said no. And that is a growing coalition, including 10% of Republicans who voted for him and disapprove of the job that he's doing. And so there's an opportunity here for Democrats to really mobilize this growing opposition of folks that would like to see more Democrats fight back as much and as visibly as possible and not roll over and play dead the way James Carville is encouraging them to.
Your number one, and we're going to talk about this before I go to my panelists for questions, something that we've said, I consistently said during the campaign, you got some of these Negroes out here like, oh, Roman, you got $350,000 from the Kamala Harris campaign for ads, but they want to ignore the other 599,700,000 that was spent on ads that largely white media got. You said underinvestment caused significant erosion to Democratic base, could signal a realignment if not corrected. The bottom line is this here. The people who are more likely going to vote for you is your base. You must shore up your base. I'm sorry. I was there the day before the election. That damn Kamala Harris rally in Philadelphia was fucking obscene. It was obscene. And I mean, I was standing there, we're covering it, and I'm like, I wonder how much all of this costs and if they put this much money into the ground game in Philadelphia alone. When we were in Houston, I'm born and raised in Houston. I love my city. But the rally before the election in Houston was dumb. It was dumb. And I'm sitting there going, I wonder how much has been put. The fact of the matter is that the Democrats, and this is white Democratic strategists, white Democratic media strategists, white people who run campaigns. And I'm going to say this. You don't have to say it. You don't have to nod your head. You don't do any of this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The reality is this here. Jen O'Malley Dillon, initially Anita Dunn, who got booted by Kamala, but she was with Joe's campaign. Later, Stephanie Cutter, David Plouffe. They were not listening to the black people on the campaign. They were not listening to the black staffers, the black pollsters, the black strategists who were trying to tell them. I talked to folks in Georgia who said they had a news conference in front of a John Lewis mural in Atlanta, and headquarters struck everything in the copy that mentioned John Lewis activism and protest. Well, why the hell are you even doing that? And so they spent money. Yes, this is an appropriate word. They were niggardly with the money for black radio, black newspaper, because their whole deal was, oh, we got them. No, you didn't have them, okay? They made people like me jump through hoops to even get interviews, and this is why they keep losing. They are running a 1984 black strategy in 2025. You cannot show up at the NAACP Freedom Fund dinner. You cannot just drop in to some black churches in October and win. You have to be spending money in the year. If it's a November election, you got to be spending 12 months out. And you got to be educating, enlightening, informing. That's what you got to do. And that's literally what you're saying in number one.
I mean, look, Roland, I'll go as far as to say we got to start spending right now. This is a part of the narrative that we are combating, and this is why what you're doing is so important, is that the right doesn't stop campaigning. Donald Trump is running, they are running Donald Trump ads on this program today. Right now, they are running Donald Trump ads today. I just saw, what was it, Texas Steel or something. And so, look, they are never going, they will continue communicating with our audience. The only reason Republicans have seen the increase that they have seen amongst black youth and amongst black men, the only reason, it's not because they changed their policies. It's not because they changed their message. They're not saying something different to black folks than they've been saying. The only reason they have doubled their support amongst young black voters and amongst black men is because they are spending money trying, and they didn't used to. And that is not unique to Donald Trump. That is up and down the ballot. We see candidates like Tom Tillis and Perdue and the Republican in Pennsylvania. I just forgot his name. But they've all increased their support amongst young black voters and amongst black men. And so, look, when you have a group of voters who have been, it's like a voter told me in a focus group, my hood ain't getting no better. Young black man told me in Pennsylvania, my hood ain't getting no better under Obama. It ain't getting no worse under Trump. So what have Kamala and Biden got to do with me? For voters like that, what we call rightfully cynical voters, those closest to the pain, that don't often feel our interventions, those voters actually don't like either party. They don't like Trump or Biden. They don't like Democrats or Republicans. And so what they are going with is the candidate that is offering to blow all of this shit up. This is why, Roland, we have seen this voter that confuses the hell out of Washington, and that's the Bernie Trump voters that voted for Bernie Sanders and are now voting for Donald Trump. Well, that's because they're voting for disruption. They want to break a system that has failed them, and Democrats spend too much time defending it.
Questions from panel. Reese, you're first.
Terence, it's always good to be with you. So much of what you said, I have been warning people about. But help me reconcile this, because, your data talks about the issues that are most important to Black people. And the discussion you and Roland had was around cultural issues, things that Democrats themselves did not focus on. I didn't see Kamala Harris run pro-trans ads, pro-LGBTQ ads. I saw her running ads around her economic policy, around her being tough on immigration and things like that. And so how much of it over the arc of your research during the campaign and after are perceptions driven by the Republicans really owning the narrative on what Democrats are talking about, as opposed to Democrats owning the narrative on what their policies are and what their emphasis is on?
That's exactly right. Look,
but before you answer that, Terrence, before you answer that, I'm going to throw in one more thing. She wasn't running those ads, but what the campaign failed to do, they actually failed to respond. The campaign literally said, Quentin Folks, the number two, that they believed that the transgender commercials were having no impact. And we were like, what in the hell are y'all talking about? I'm like, guys, they were running 8 to 12 in every football game. I'm telling you right now, Jen O'Malley Dillon, Stephanie Cutter, David Plouffe, and Quentin Folks, I don't know what planetary system that they were campaigning in, but it was totally different than the one that we were living in. Terrence, go ahead.
Political malpractice, for sure.
Listen, I look, when it comes to these culture issues, you're absolutely right, Reese. The Democrats have not been engaging, have not waged their political campaigns on these cultural issues. Republicans are certainly leading these conversations around wokeism, around DEI, around. But the problem is that we are allowing Republicans to shape the issue context that the election is happening in. I could have told you 2 years ago that if the number one issue in every election is economy. 2 years ago, I could have told you if the number two issue was not abortion, then we would probably lose. If the number
Mm-hmm.
two issue was immigration or crime, and instead of abortion or guns, then we're probably going to lose. And so
Yeah.
we allowed them to shape the issue context, and they have done that by now launching look, we are in a culture war, but it's a war
Mm-hmm.
that Republicans have started
Yep.
and that Democrats have to respond to, because when we don't, here's how this works. Democrats don't respond or defend critical race theory. Democrats don't
Mm-hmm.
respond or defend the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action. Democrats don't respond or defend to removing Black history from books. In fact, our response is we don't believe in CRT. We ain't woke. Our response is to deny all of these things. And so when
Mm-hmm.
they now come in and start gutting all of this shit, and Democrats now look to Black voters or look to voters of color to mobilize a resistance and an opposition. Well, we haven't given voters a reason to defend affirmative action, CRT. In fact, 40% of Black folks believe that racism exists, but doesn't prevent them from achieving from pursuing opportunity. And so, if we're not presenting the pain or the alternative, then we are going to continue to allow Republicans to shape the narrative and to launch a culture war that we have not figured out how to show up to.
Mm-hmm.
Noah?
Terence, thank you so much for this data. This is wonderful. I love this conversation. I during the campaign, I was a national security and foreign policy messenger, and while foreign policy typically doesn't win elections, foreign policy did factor in to the emotionality of the election, right? And as one of the people who were invited into the rooms, but who wasn't listened to in terms of messaging, a lot of that fell on deaf ears. And then we saw the results. We saw how Michigan responded. And so my question is, as we're seeing all of these different things happen, as we're seeing the way that Trump is blustering, that bullish kind of posture towards Mexico, towards Canada, towards Panama, towards Greenland, while the traditional thinking is, and some of the data would support, that foreign policy does not win elections, it does impact elections. How can Democrats be out there right now talking about this? I think that they're making a mistake by not talking about colonial imperialism, this kind of huge reversal, back to this time that no one wants. I think it's a mistake that they're not leaning into this kind of rhetoric, because it's more than rhetoric. It's true. So in your professional opinion, how does that shift begin to happen in terms of messaging? I'm talking to some folks on the Hill because they're like, what do we do? But how do you get them to listen?
Yeah. Foreign policy is interesting because you're right. For Black voters and for most voters of color, it doesn't typically register as a top issue that impacts who they are voting for. Even in this election, we tested the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine as the saliency of these issues and how much it was impacting people. I don't have the exact number, but I could tell you less than 10% of Black folks say that was an important factor in who they were and who they consider voting for. But this is the important part. It wasn't that salient, but it was quite resonant for the folks that it was. For the less than 10% that said they were considering it, it was their top issue. Mm-hmm. Right. And so for those young folks and those voters of color and those folks in Michigan, while they didn't represent a large part of the constituency, it was the most important thing to them. And many of them felt like they didn't get the response that they needed from the Democratic Party. I do think that there's an opportunity here as he continues to strip and rip foreign aid from around the world. I remember shithole countries coming up in a lot of focus groups in his last administration. When he said that about countries in Africa, focus groups were repeating that back to me. Well, unfortunately, I haven't heard anybody bringing up the fact that Elon Musk is in South Africa trying to return back to apartheid, and that Donald Trump is
Right.
offering white Afrikaners to be refugees in America, that we are withholding funding from countries across Africa. And frankly, that a lot of that funding, while it does benefit those countries and they need that aid, it is also to keep us safe. Look, guys, measles and AIDS and pandemic, these things don't have country borders. This is why we fight these pandemics around the world, because it's the only way to keep them out of America. It's to fight them there before they get here. And so we have not, Democrats have a lot to respond to right now. This is a part of the muzzle velocity of the Republican strategy, of the MAGA strategy. But a part of what we have to figure out how to respond to all of these things. We can't allow any of these attacks that hurt our communities or frankly hurt our diaspora, because again, while it may be less than 10% that are prioritizing the diaspora, the folks that do prioritize it as their number one issue. And so we got to find a way to respond to it and to mobilize the folks that do care to actually join this opposition.
Thank you.
Political sis, your question.
Hey, Terence, how are you? I'm here in North Carolina. What I do know is that USAID affects farmers here in this state. What I do know is that USAID affect education on a college level when it comes to grants. And what I do know is that in the triangle, people are losing their jobs right now because of USAID. And what I also know is that Tom Tillis is going to be funded like an ass when it comes to his reelection in 2026 by Elon Musk. And what's also ticking me off is veterans right now. Veterans are so pissed with Tom Tillis. I'm talking about veterans that voted for his ass. Mm-hmm. No one yet has came out and said that they are going to run against Tom Tillis. No one yet has done that. And everyone, I think, is waiting to see what our former governor, Roy Cooper, is going to do. We do not have my Congresswoman, Deborah Ross. Her little prissy ass is not nowhere near to be found. She's on TikTok or X. She's nowhere near to be found. And right now, even on a local level, our local politicians, right, our state politicians, they are nowhere to be found. They are not showing up at these town hall meetings. They are not going in these rural areas that's going to be affected the most by cuts or getting rid of the Department of Education. So I'm with you on that. I'm looking for shit that I know. What I see at USAID, okay, let me grab what's going to affect my people, right? That's what I'm gonna look at when it comes to USAID, the Department of Education. Let me say, well, shit, wait a minute now. We're talking about Title I. We know it's going to affect low income. We're talking Head Start. We know this shit, right? How can we get them out to understand? I'm not talking about the voters, right? We're trying to rile up the voters, right? We're trying to get them going. How do we get these politicians? I'm just a country girl here from North Carolina. Don't nobody listen to me, right? So what do we do, Terence? What can I do?
Yeah. Well, listen, I believe that the South got next. Hit Strategies is advancing a New South, a Blue South project. I believe that blue wall in the Midwest, we've seen how shaky it is, how non-durable that blue wall in the Midwest is. But I do believe there's an opportunity to build a much more durable black-ass wall across the South. You just had Gary Chambers on. You just had Gary Chambers on here, who's been raving the flag on this. Places like Louisiana, Mississippi, the South are not red states; they're just oppressed states.
That's right.
North Carolina, South Carolina. It is no coincidence that in the South that the South is where the blackest states in America are, and it's in the same exact states. You can almost track the correlation directly. The blacker the state is, the lower the black turnout is.
Yeah,
it's almost a direct correlation.
That is absolutely crazy. And here's the deal. And here's the deal, Terence, that we have to understand. And when you talked about that blue wall, 2030, the numbers are going to be changing. California, New York State, Wisconsin, blue states are going to be losing congressional seats. They're going to be shifting those to red states, which means Democrats are going to have a consistent strategy to win Georgia and or North Carolina. And they're going to have to make Florida, they got to figure out what to do. Florida has to come back purple. The numbers are shifting. It's going to make it harder because to get to 270, if blue states lose anywhere from 6 to 10 electoral college votes.
That's right. That's right. But the good news is while the geographic patterns don't favor Democrats, the demographic patterns do. What do I mean by that? The places that this growth is happening might not benefit us, but the people that are causing this growth should be benefiting us. This growth is being caused by people of color and by young people. I don't know about Florida. I still got PTSD from my Andrew Gillum days in Florida, but I do know I do know places like Mississippi. Mississippi, the blackest state in all of America, where Democrats just lost in 2023 in an off year with a black candidate running for governor. We lost by 2 points. In Mississippi, we lost by less than we lost in Michigan. And so there's an opportunity to build this black wall across the South. But to Roland's point, those are not just strategic decisions, those are economic decisions. Because to build a black ass wall in the South means you're going to have to empower a bunch of black organizations and black media and black operatives in order to go get those black voters that feel like politics don't got nothing to do with them. The same way Stacey Abrams did in Georgia.
Yep.
Indeed. Terence Woodberry, we appreciate it, my brother. Thank you, Terence. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.